Today, we're diving into a crucial topic for homeowners and prospective buyers. It's the rising threat of mortgage scams. From sophisticated schemes that steal property titles to fraud rings exploiting loopholes in the lending process. Mortgage scams are becoming more elaborate and much harder to detect. Even some high-profile cases here in Canada have shown us how these scams can leave us victims with devastating financial and personal consequences. In today's episode, we'll explore some of the major types of mortgage scams, real-life cases that have made the headlines, and most importantly, some practical tips to help you protect your family and your property. Canada has seen several high-profile mortgage scams that highlight different types of fraud and underscore the importance of vigilance. Here are a few cases.
So these kinds of scams typically rely on stealing the identity of the homeowners and making use of that to do transactions. Now, these transactions could involve transfer of the ownership, taking a mortgage and running away with the money or the proceeds, or it could even be smaller scams where vacant properties are rented out without the knowledge of the owner. So basically, the scamster runs away with the deposit money and maybe the first month of rent, leading to a lot of anxiety, not just for homeowners, but maybe even renters who are in that situation. Now, there have been quite a few high-profile cases in Canada, which Jerome sort of alluded to. And I think the one of them that comes to my mind is the Fortress Real Development's Ponzi scheme. Jerome, do you have any specific insight or something that you can share about how this scam was perpetrated?
Yeah, so I actually had clients who participated in it. And at one time, I was approached by other mortgage brokers to find clients that could help fund the Fortress Real Developments system. Now, at the time, everything seemed above board. You brought in an investor, and others brought in investors, and they pooled their funds in what's called a syndicate mortgage. So that means that everybody who puts money into it gets a percentage of that overall big mortgage. So if you put in 500,000 and that represents 0.5% of the overall size, you basically get registered as a 0.5% ownership of this property. The challenge came in that they were promising really high returns for all of the investors while the construction was happening, et cetera, et cetera. Unfortunately, it was later revealed that the funds were greatly mismanaged, and investors who put their funds into these projects lost millions, and the projects in some cases never even got off the ground. So a very heart-wrenching story of somebody who's wanting to take advantage of diversifying their portfolio in some cases. Some people put all of their money into it and ended up losing pretty much everything they had. So syndicate mortgage products have taken on much higher scrutiny with our regulators these days, and aren't very often offered to the general public anymore. They still get offered, but to usually more sophisticated investors, people who have, a lot more funds available to lose and are okay and can manage it if they lose it. But yeah,
so essentially, investors who are sort of termed as accredited investors. I think more and more increasingly, the rules and regulations are pointing to such investors only being able to invest in such products.
Yes. And there is a very defined list of things that if you are to be classified as a designated investor, there are some very defined targets that your profile must meet in order to be able to engage in this type of lending. So yeah, one of the worst and probably the biggest in Canada, I think, was the Fortress Real Developments scenario.
Okay. So did it really start off as a scam, or it just became a scam overnight? Do we know about anything about it?
I don't think it started off as a scam. I mean, I really don't believe that. But I think what ended up happening was when the people who were doing the management of the funds realized that there was a lot more money coming in than they originally anticipated, they took advantage. And unfortunately, um, yeah, it ended up coming crashing down because of the management related issues of the funds.
And I don't think that is an isolated incident, right? Where generally we see when high flying social media influencers seeking money,
Yeah,
when the ball gets rolling and the money keeps coming in, I
yeah,
feel that they are hesitant to say no to new money.
yeah. Oh,
And
yeah, for
avenues to
sure.
deploy new money becomes smaller and smaller, little and little, and the returns that they promise are no more viable.
Yep, yep. I would 100% agree. So for anybody who's looking and you see some of these offerings being put out there by people who are standing on yachts and enjoying the high nightlife and stuff like that, reconsider. Are those the individuals that you want to manage your money?
Yeah, I guess the lesson is if it's too good to be true, then most likely
Yeah.
it is not true.
Yes. Yeah. And people can be very, very good and adept at selling whatever their wares are. In this case, it was, things that were real, things that were in front of you that you could see. And that's what makes it worse. It wasn't that the the intention of the fund was meant to be fraudulent. It was a real, excuse me, it was a real fund. It
Mhm.
was just the way that it was managed. And sometimes it's easy to tell when you look at how those people share their lives experiences.
And generally, these things don't unravel in a very short period of time, right? So these
No.
can go on. Things might look successful for years before they sort of unwind and unravel and explode.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I guess it's also more difficult because generally these kinds of schemes are more private, wherein you don't really know and understand what is the financials of that structure.
Yeah.
Are they really making money, or is Peter paying Paul, who's paying somebody else? And it
Yep.
keeps going on, right? It's, at some point, it becomes sort of a chain or a multi-level marketing system kind of thing, where
Yep.
somebody is paying for somebody else's returns.
Yep. And I would say I would offer that some clues to the stability of the management side of things would be when you ask for an update on the project, what are you given? When
Mhm.
you ask for statements for your funds, what are you given? When you come to a natural renewal of where your funds are, what information is being presented to you? How easy is it to pull your money out and say, okay, you know what? I went in and I made 8% for a year, and that's good enough for me. Now I'm going to take it and put it somewhere else. Is it
Mhm.
easy for you to get your money out? All
Yeah,
of those things are really, really important indicators of how good the people that are managing the project are doing.
yeah. Okay. So
And
those,
and and it's not necessarily going to stop people from continuing to try. It's just be cautious, right? Really dig into who you're investing with and
yeah,
know.
yeah, and I'm sure there would be other genuine schemes which are trying to do such things.
Mhm.
Maybe they can work out a scenario where they are able to provide more genuine information, right? Meaning a third party who is validating and checking and certifying that the information which is actually being provided is in fact true.
Like you said, Neil, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And really, really, really assess your own risk tolerance. If you're risk averse, some of these things aren't going to be the type of project that you'd want to be involved
Okay. Now let's move on to something which is outright fraud, right? So the topic that we talked about was maybe they were not fraud and turned out to be later on fraud. But let's talk
Yeah.
about things which start off with an intent of being fraudulent,
Yeah.
right?
So
And that is where I think phishing schemes, identity theft schemes come into picture, where somebody is trying to assume the identity of a homeowner or somebody who has an asset
yeah.
that can be utilized.
Yeah. So one case that comes to mind is they orchestrated a large-scale mortgage fraud situation that involved creating false identities and financial profiles to secure and obtain over $9 million in fraudulent mortgage loans.
Okay.
Now, I mean, that's pretty significant. I mean, $9 million is a lot of money to get through fraudulent means in mortgage money. But this ring of fraudulent activity exploited some of the weaknesses in the application and verification processes of several major Canadian banks. Ultimately, it cost the lenders significant financial losses, leading to multiple arrests. But the exposure, I think, is the important thing for us to understand, that not every lender is looking at things as maybe as deeply and as thoroughly as they should.
Systems evolve over time, systems strengthen over time. So it's not like a scheme that or a scam that took place a couple of years back can be easily repeated, or the same methods may not work again.
Yep. But it probably will. Because there are trusting people out there, and much like the first case that we talked about, there are just really good salespeople out there. There are people who can confidently sell something either that doesn't exist, or they can catch people off guard and they know when to sell. And this seems like one of those cases where not only were they good at selling to each other, but they managed to get it by some lenders.
What are some of the ways where somebody might be, or such a scamster might be stealing identities? What are the different ways that people?
Yeah, God, these days, there are multiple ways that this can happen. Relative of mine who lives in Kingston, Ontario, unfortunately had a scenario where before she moved there, she used to live in Cambridge, and she would get mail there in Cambridge, even though that there was a forwarding. Sometimes it bypasses that, or the forwarding only lasts so long. And then somebody had basically found some of her information and created some credit using old mail.
Okay.
So that was an interesting case, and her credit score dropped significantly. She found out that there were credit accounts opened in her name that didn't belong to her. So post mail. There could be a case where you innocently plug in some of your information into something online, and all of a sudden the scammers are searching out everything that they can on you and using some of your social media profiles and information from there, basically create an identity and then use it to do the same type of activity, where they're effectively stealing who you are and creating accounts that you never personally signed up for.
Yeah, I've seen instances where there are websites created which look very similar to what a bank's website might look like.
Yes.
Or an email address which looks very similar to where you generally or often are receiving emails from.
Yep.
So if you are accessing such websites, sharing your credentials, that's a perfect giveaway.
Oh,
if
yeah.
you are clicking on links which in these fraudulent emails, then you're easily sharing your information.
Yeah.
There could be instances where somebody is calling you, representing that they are from CRA, or they are from a certain bank and
Yeah.
trying to get information out of you.
The Credit Bureau of Canada. That seems to be the most recent one. We're calling from the Credit Bureau of Canada, and you are gonna go to jail. And all this kind of stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Some of them are very sophisticated and extremely difficult to tell that that's what it is, and
mhm.
others are pretty blatant, right? Almost as bad as, do you need your ducts cleaned kind of bad. One of the ones that we talked about just before the episode started was, my mother-in-law would get a call early in the morning from somebody claiming to represent her grandson and that he's in trouble and needed some funds. So, when you're half awake and all you hear is somebody saying, your grandson, and they provided the name, I'm not going to share it because, again, we're online. But yeah, like those types of things can catch you off guard at different times of the day. And again, kind of sophisticated. If you
Yep.
were a little bit more lucid and maybe you were an earlier riser, it wouldn't be such a big issue, but they're happening and they're catching people off guard. If they didn't work, people wouldn't try them.
I just recently read about an instance where an email was taken over. So if you are using a certain email address to communicate with the bank, or the bank has that email address and somebody hacks that,
Yeah.
and they could use that email to create other accounts or move your e-transfer, for example, and deposit in some other bank.
And we just talked last week about CRA having had issues. I'm just trying to think of.
Yeah, wherein tax refunds were stolen, right? Millions of
Yeah.
dollars of tax refund were transferred to fraudulent accounts.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's CRA. Yeah, I mean, we used to think that Postmail was great to be able to send all of our information through because it's run by the government, it's safe, and now everybody does things online, and they're encouraged to do so because it's more secure. But really, is it? I don't
Yeah.
know if there's a definitive answer here, unfortunately, because
Maybe
everything.
we should switch to fax.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't think I recall too much times anybody ever having a fax intercepted.
I was surprised. The other day, I got a call from CRA and somebody claiming to be from CRA and asked for my documents to be sent to the fax to a certain number. And I spent the next 4 hours trying to figure out whether that phone number was indeed from CRA.
Mm,
And the fax number was from CRA. And I called up CRA and they could not even confirm it.
right.
So, confirm it either. Yeah, it is true that it is a CRA number or that it is not. So then those are difficult situations.
Yeah. Yeah. Or this one actually happened to me about a month ago where I got a call from CRA and, we have to identify the person that we're calling. So can you please give me your information? And I'm like, no. No, you called me. You should know who you want to talk to. And he's like, so how about I send you a text? And I'm like, that ain't gonna work because how do I know the text is coming from CRA? And so we went kind of roundabout for this for a little while, and he just said, so you're not gonna verify who you are? And I'm like, again, you called me. Why would I verify who I am? You should know who you want to talk to. And I'm,
My God.
we're getting into those scenarios, and I don't know what the solution to that is. Well, I feel like it's going to come towards things like this, where we're doing video phone calls and stuff.
Well, there comes AI.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now you don't know if the voice you're hearing is true.
Yeah.
The image that you're seeing is true, or is it all conjured up in some AI world?
And there are companies out there that actively say put your photo in and we'll make a likeness and then we'll turn it into video for you so that way you don't have to be on screen. And there are other companies out there that say, just do a 1-minute recording of all of these things and we'll be able to accurately replicate your voice. So that way you can just type things into a system. You'll have your image act out the statements that you claim, and you will have your voice being the ones that do it.
Mm-hmm.
So we're moving towards an artificial world, but at the same time, we're also trying to compete against it or combat against it.
Yeah, safeguard ourselves from the downsides of such a system.
Yeah,
or a
like
world.
I feel like we're in a rock and a hard place here, but we're doing it to ourselves.
Yeah, I guess things will get better. How
Hopefully.
about things like a title fraud? There are instances where you find people coming to your door
Mhm.
offering different services. Maybe it's a renovation work, or maybe you're buying something.
Yeah.
Are there chances that things could go wrong in that process, where homeowners might lose control or give up?
Yeah. Yes. Unfortunately, yes. One of the things that happened is that some of these guys, they may or may not actually do work on your house.
Mhm,
Some of them could be as simple as, we're here to replace your water heater, your furnace, your air conditioner, and we'll take your payments over 3 or 4 years or something like that.
mhm,
And then what they end up doing is they put some kind of a lien against your property, which doesn't allow you to do any additional financing or changing anything on your home ownership policy, which is called a title,
mhm,
until they're paid out. And at times, these liens can incur additional fees, and if you pay it out before the prescribed time, it could be like as much as double what the original price was going to be.
mhm.
So it may not be the direct, we're here to scam you, but they're pretty insidious in how they can impact you negatively.
Yeah. So there was this case. I don't know if you recall a broker who used to come pretty often on TV,
Hmm.
and I think he was working in cahoot with some contractors who would go out, and especially they would target older people. They would offer to renovate their homes at
Yeah,
exaggerated costs,
yeah,
then have them take out a private mortgage using this broker.
yeah,
Then the homeowners would not be able to keep up with those payments, and they would end up losing their homes,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And I heard recently that broker's license was revoked.
as it should be.
Mhm. Yeah,
um,
definitely.
yeah,
I just wonder why it took that long.
probably because it was a broker and he was meeting his license requirements on paper.
Mhm.
But was he doing what the license required him to do, which is to inform the borrower, in this case, all of the risks associated with the mortgage that he was placing on the property title? My guess would be no. It was probably, the service was provided, the information was shared to the broker. The broker basically created the paperwork that was necessary, got it signed by the borrower without any explanations whatsoever. That borrower is literally just thinking, hey, I'm getting this renovation done, yoo-hoo, whatever, right? My house value is going to be higher. I'm going to have a new kitchen, whatever the case is. And next thing you know, the bills start piling up and they're like, why are these happening?
Mhm.
Right? And there was never any good explanation by the mortgage person who set that up, which happens in all kinds of cases, not just in these scenarios that we're discussing. Um, for the most part, I think most mortgage professionals do take the time to explain the the points that need to be addressed when you're getting your mortgage. They talk
Yep.
about the risks associated with the rate type that you're getting, fixed, variable, blah blah blah, and they do take your financial picture into consideration, that's what makes us good at what we do. But
Mhm.
are there some out there that don't do this? Unfortunately, yes.
Yes.
And I've seen too many of them myself.
Yeah, I think you have been in the industry for long enough to see all kinds of flavors.
Yeah. Yeah. When I get clients who say, well, the last broker I used said, I'm going to go to this lender, which is an A lender, but I had to pay him so much money up front.
Mhm.
And I'm like, that shouldn't have been the case because
Yeah.
most cases we get paid by the lender.
Yeah,
So,
typically with prime lenders, and
yeah.
these days they're offering cashbacks.
Yeah. Yeah. And something that I will state out here out loud for anybody listening is that you should never have to pay a mortgage broker directly.
Mhm.
If you are going to pay a broker a fee for anything, they should disclose to you what the fee is for, how much it is, and when you do pay, it either goes to the lawyer's office and the lawyer's office will then transfer the money to the mortgage brokerage.
How about straw buyers? And maybe explain that term, straw buyers.
Yeah. This one is like the term that I've used, insidious, which is you don't always know where it starts, or it's not always easily seen from the outside. A straw buyer is when you might get a scenario where you can't afford to buy a home yourself.
Mhm.
So you find somebody, a relative, a friend, and in some cases these days it's people that you don't even know, through online meetups and different groups and stuff like that, where somebody else actually goes on the mortgage because they can just like they have enough income to declare.
Mhm.
Um, but it's not their house; it's your house.
Yeah, and that is where I've seen many lender documents which ask specifically,
Yeah,
right? Are you seeking this mortgage for
yeah,
your benefit or the benefit of somebody else?
yeah. What makes this one really, really difficult is it's easy to say I'm going to move in, and
Mhm.
then at the last minute they don't. And if something seems fishy to us, we could turn down the file, but then that person literally just moves over to the next person who might be too busy to take everything in, and
Mhm.
then they just go ahead and fund it, and then bam, the mortgage is funded for somebody else's intent effectively.
But things go wrong when it is somebody else who is getting on the mortgage or securing the mortgage, and they hand over the control of the property to somebody else who then ends up not paying them back or defaulting on the mortgage obligation, things of that nature, right? That is where things real hurt happens.
Yes, yes. And again, those cases I think are more rare, but they do happen where somebody is convinced to go on title because there will be some benefit to them at some point.
Mhm.
The other person moves in and lives there for a while, but then the agreement is the money they're going to pay or something, and they don't, and then leaves that person on title sort of stranded. And then it really could impact their credit and other situations, even if they have another property or if they're looking at doing something for themselves in the future. I would say they're on the sophisticated side, really. The people who are perpetrating these types of scams are well versed in it, and they know what they're doing, and they know who to look for.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, they have a target customer in mind or
yeah,
client in mind.
yeah, yeah.
So what
Um,
are some of the different ways? Maybe you can discuss to as to how people can protect themselves from maybe falling victim to such schemes and scams.
yeah,
And I think I'll start up with the first one, which is to sort of look out for unusual returns which are promised,
yes,
or investments being sought without providing adequate security in lieu of those investments,
yeah,
wherein nobody owns any asset or has a claim to an asset
yes,
for those investments. I think they are especially risky,
yep,
and that that anybody getting into such kind of arrangements really has to watch out and be sure as to why they want to extend their money or hard-earned money to such investments or schemes.
But
And
yeah,
diversification, right? Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
exactly. If they want, so if they're using some high pressure tactics, or they want the money sooner than later because otherwise you're going to miss the opportunity. That's
Mhm.
another one. Like they're using FOMO, fear of missing out.
Yeah,
That seems to be a tactic that's happening. I mean, I think it's been out there for a long time.
yeah.
What about if they come out and they they say, "Oh yeah, I've got a contract and it's everything is good," but when they present it, it's like half a contract and it doesn't have all the fine print that you're used to seeing. Like, what do you do in those situations? Yeah,
If you're transferring assets, buying new assets, making new investments, and if there are terms that you're not very sure about and how it can come back and bite you,
yeah,
I would advise maybe running it through a lawyer or somebody who's
yes,
knowledgeable, taking the time to review, understand it before you sign on the dotted line.
yeah. So, what would be some, Neil, in your experience, what would be some good best practices for homeowners to use to protect themselves, especially when it comes to like home ownership and mortgage protection? What are some simple things that we can start with?
I think one of the first things that every homeowner should have is a homeowner's title insurance, and it can safeguard them against many of the defects which can come from a title standpoint, or if there is a theft of identity, then obviously that instrument can help come to help. Again, just so that everybody is clear, this is different from a lender's title insurance,
Yeah.
and we're talking specifically about homeowners title insurance, and that remains in play even if the mortgage is paid off.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That is a good one that I bet you like a ton of people don't even know exists.
Mhm. And not
Um,
not for not for a big expense, right? I think for a couple of $100
mhm.
you can get a property covered, so why not? How about when working with contractors or vendors? How do you
Oh,
vet them?
I don't think that there is one specific way that you should handle it all time, like every single time. But some things that I would recommend for people to do are, if you're dealing with contractors, I mean, we always hear, anybody watch the Mike Holmes show or anything like that, Homes on Homes, where you get shoddy construction and then afterwards you're like, well, you should have checked, were they licensed? That's the first thing to do. Are they
Mhm.
licensed? Where are they licensed with? Because having a license doesn't necessarily mean it's the best license to have. Yeah, I got a license. I'm a plumber, right? I'm going to build you an addition. Um, so obviously, make sure that the license that the person carries is the one that you need.
Yeah,
Um,
appropriate to the use.
exactly. Look them up online, read some reviews. Um,
And I would say maybe even talk with your friends, family, associates, just to get
yeah,
some feedback if they have worked with some contractors or professionals that they would recommend. So
yeah.
it's always good to have I maybe having trusted references.
Look up the business online address. Make sure that they've been in business for a while. You know, obviously do your homework on people. But the
Yeah,
one thing that I would probably say that stands out for me a lot is, if you can help it, avoid paying somebody a cash thing, especially if they ask you for a cash payment, right?
yeah, and hefty down or advances.
Here's something that I think that like, what should you do when you do engage these professionals? What is an important step in safeguarding the information that you have?
So when you're sharing information, make sure it is shared in a secured fashion, and also understand how they're going to deal with that information at their end to keep it secure.
Right, you had a conversation with a contractor about an adjustment on the type of tap that you wanted to use. Write it down, right? Make sure that you
Yeah,
tracked it, so that way, at least if they say, well, we never discussed this.
yeah, write it out and get them to acknowledge it.
Yeah, I would say follow some good practices. Use strong passwords, secure secure online accounts. What would you recommend? Let's hear your input on this.
So something that I've followed for last couple of years, and again, things generally evolve over time. Maybe what was secure yesterday is not secure anymore.
Yeah.
But I have tried to limit which email addresses I'm sharing with whom. So I tend to use separate email addresses when dealing with different kinds of entities. Like if I'm signing up for something which is a free service of sorts,
yeah,
I use my most common email address. But
right.
if I'm dealing with my bank, I use a different address.
Yeah, it segments where the risk is.
Yeah, and some people extend that to even phone numbers, right? So that could be something that they could do.
Yeah.
I also look at my credit reports. I wouldn't say monthly, but once in a while, I would just go in and check and see that there are no new accounts that I'm not aware of. Whatever is being reported on my credit report is fairly accurate to my knowledge.
On that note, I think that it is extremely important for everybody to actually look at their credit card statements and look at every single line and charge that's on there, so that way you can validate what it's being used for. So what would you do? And I mean, this is very generic, and it certainly isn't out there to provide any legal advice to anybody, but it's some immediate types of things that you may want to think about doing. But what would you do if you are a victim?
So first and foremost, I would say if it is anything financial, maybe reach out to the lender or the bank where such and such incident has happened. Make sure that they are aware. If your credit card is stolen, lost, make sure it's reported and blocked. Report such incidents to the police, so at least they can. They may not be able to do anything immediately, but at least they can keep track and follow it up. Of course, depending on the severity of the incidents, maybe you want to get your lawyer involved.
Yeah. One thing that I would probably say, if you even hint at that you think that something might be wrong, is definitely contact your credit bureau. And you can create what's called a narrative on your credit report that basically says if anybody is applying for credit in your name, they call you. So
And you could even put a freeze on your credit file. Like I have a US credit history.
Okay.
I went in and I chose to lock it, meaning nobody can do anything with it.
Okay.
Without getting clearance from me.
So a couple of new scams and coming up scams that we've sort of touched on a little bit earlier. Things that people should become aware of or to keep an eye out for.
I think AI is the buzzword. Increasingly, it is very easy to impersonate, be it using an image or a video. So the only thing that you can do is to try to make sure that your information is not getting out there, so that there is less opportunity for people to recreate those things.
Yes.
Right. So maybe if it's a social media account, if you're not a public entity, maybe it's a good idea to lock those accounts, not make it public that anybody and everybody can view it. Make sure that fraudsters don't have enough to go with and target.
Yep. So as we wrap up this episode, which feels like it's quite a long one actually.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it's clear that in the mortgage and real estate landscape, they offer a lot of opportunities for some of these things to happen, and they come with real risks. The good news is that by staying informed and taking some very simple precautions, you can safeguard your home, you can safeguard your finances against many of the scams that are happening these days and future ones coming out. So whether you're buying or selling, or you're just keeping up with the mortgage that you have, remember, be vigilant. Vigilant. I hope today's episode has given you a stronger sense of what to watch out for and ways to keep your investment secure, your house. Thank you for tuning in. Stay proactive, stay aware, and protect what's yours.